Well, I guess
Why don't
we'll
we
be pass it over to old Fringy here for giving us. I don't know. We probably have to do a decent bit of preamble for this one, actually,
we
considering it's the
do,
most
we do.
significant we've ever had in the past, however many years of any world building being done in the MCU, which is funny at this point.
Well, we can talk about
Well,
sort of
what I'm referring to is before you even get to any events, there's a whole bunch
yeah.
of realities that are in place that are like, excuse me, like how is this
Oh yeah,
happening?
yeah, yeah. That's true. We can do that. But I figured before, and since we already kind of touched on it anyway, it feels worthwhile, even depending on where the observations go when we actually talk about the film, to recap our overall perspectives on the
Sure.
Captain America series and the role of Captain America up until this film. Because all of that will kind of been feeding. It ought to have some relevance for this film, but I figure that the easiest way to do that is just left to right. But well, I guess that's right to left. I'll go last. Just the overall thoughts on the Captain America film series.
I mean,
Um,
okay, yeah.
Wait, sorry, you should right to left. It is me, isn't it?
Right
Yeah.
to left, yes.
I'm just getting my coordinations confused. Like it was interesting going back to basically the beginning and watching them all the way through. Thankfully, Disney Plus does this little thing where it bundles all the character movies together, or at least it bundles what it thinks are all the character movies together. It didn't include the Incredible Hulk for obvious reasons, which was slightly inconvenient because then I found out quite late on that I'd have to go and watch that to understand large parts of this movie. But it was nice going back to watch, say, the first Avengers, which I didn't really rate all that highly. It was just kind of there. It existed. I think it's basically competent. It's quite a flat movie, but it does a lot of relatively simple things well, which now you notice their absence become more impressive. Just little things like, immediately after getting the super soldier serum, Cap does get winged by a bullet, which proves to you that he's still capable of being damaged, so he's not invulnerable, so there are still stakes in fight scenes and all the rest of it. All that very basic character establishment, stakes setting stuff, which is largely missing from most modern Marvel movies. This movie understands what the most popular Captain America movie is, though, because this movie knows that the Winter Soldier is held in very high regard. And it's the one that I really want to like the most, but struggle to like the most when actually watching it, just because I think the ideas are really interesting and the concepts are really interesting, and the fact that they can attempt at least to tell a grounded but thematically relevant story using Cap as this mirror against which to judge the state of a modern America, but without impugning necessarily his own honor and his own decency. That's all good and interesting stuff. I think that film largely just fails in large ways during delivery. And then Civil War, obviously, is the other very popular Captain America movie, which this film also understands is popular because it steals lots of its lines, which is great. I think like the mistake that, say, like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier made. Are we including that in the Captain America movies
Yeah,
roundup?
we have
Yeah.
to. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh God,
Yeah,
because
You kind of
I
have to with
basically
Isaiah.
did that in
impossible.
it was. I was really hoping that no one in that movie would turn up in this one, in that series. Sorry, would turn up in this one, but they all did. So, although are they the same? Well, we'll get into that. Like the mistake they made there is that it was the Cap in his original instantiation is a really, really good way of sort of portraying the old timeless values that America is known for, but that are also universal values, right? Because of the way the country is founded as ideas rather than, say, like, on racial or ethnic groups or anything like that. So Cap, coming from back in time when America conceives of itself as being more innocent and noble, is able to stand against things like the growth of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the growth of the surveillance state and hold a mirror up to it, as I mentioned. That's all really good stuff. And then when you get to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the whole point of that movie is to say, well, actually, there was never any ideal against which to hold the modern country, because the ideal was kind of always built on a lie. That makes the character way less compelling, way less useful. It just becomes more of a generic retelling of modern America's faults with itself. And I think consequently, they made changes to this movie to try and remove as many of those elements as possible. A lot of the ADR lines that are quite visible in Cap 4, I think, were probably doing away with the kind of lines you would expect to see and hear in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So overall, a really interesting premise for a character whose films don't quite live up to it, but I still enjoyed rewatching them. Sorry, I realized that was a really, really long recap, but
all good.
No, no, no,
we've got time. It's EFAP.
It's EFAP.
that's right. Rags.
There's something about Captain America that maybe more than any other superhero has this sort of core of heart and principle, and there's something about what Captain America I think should stand for in the way that he operates, especially with the complexities of a modern world, that make him particularly interesting. When you look back at the Captain America movies that came before, regardless of what you think of their quality, we're a little bit infamous for not thinking that Winter Soldier is good at all. I actually quite like the first Captain America movie, and I love Civil War. It's excellent. And I guess because we have to throw in that fucking TV show, which we absolutely despise. I think what can be said about at least the movies is that there was a heart to those movies, and there was something that those movies wanted to say, regardless of their execution, which it ranges from being very bad to quite excellent. They were trying to say something. They had some kind of a message. They had some sort of a premise. They had some kind of a challenge that Captain America had to rise up against, where he ultimately had to change or grow, or sort of harden himself against. Captain America movies seem to be really... A lot of the premise is centered around... I know it sounds stupid to say, but now you kind of have to say that. Captain America movies were really very much about Captain America and the challenges he might have to face, not just in terms of laser battles and fights and superhero pew-pews, but like the internal sorts of conflicts and, you know, his principles. And when you compare this movie, watching it, to those, this movie feels bizarrely out of place in the fact that I feel like this movie had absolutely nothing to say really whatsoever. Like if you dig down, you can find something, but it's so minor and it doesn't really pop up that much, and it's so poorly executed that you might even that it doesn't really feel like there's something. This doesn't feel like a Captain America movie. This feels like just the sort of bad movies that we'd get all the time. But I'm past being angry. I think I've just accepted that in the MCU. I'm just past being angry. I can't muster up the energy.
Resigned to your fate.
Kind of. As I'd said before, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was not something that we were like planning really uncovering until we got to like episode 3, I think, and then it made us so mad and it pissed us off so much that we had to cover it and talk about how terrible it was. Because there was a time where we still legitimately had a lot of deep investment in a lot of the characters and stuff that were going on in the MCU.
Well, that was way early. That was the beginning of Phase 4.
Earlier.
So,
yeah,
you know,
that's
Endgame
right.
had come out,
That was a long time ago.
There was Endgame as a problem, but this was early enough.
We were different people back then, and the MCU is kind of different, and it slid far. And so now, as I watch this movie, and I see I just felt like this apathetic sort of, oh, this is bad, and that line doesn't make sense, and oh, they should have done this, and I don't know why this person said that, and what are you doing here? That probably wouldn't happen. It was just like it was like a clinical dissection where I was just disinterested. I think the analogy I used when I got back from the theater late because my Valentine's Day plans went on a bit longer than I thought they would, but I got back from the theater and I talked with Frankie briefly, and I said, one way to describe this movie would be like if you had a relative that died, right? You have a relative that died, and you really like this relative. You got along well, and you respected them, and you know, even for all their flaws, they were a good person deep down, and you were sort of close, and you're sad that they're gone. And you're at the graveyard where they're buried, and you're watching some guy digging up the corpse of your relative that you liked. But you're just like you're cognizant enough to know that the corpse of the person isn't the person that you love. The person that you loved is gone, and it's not actually the corpse. That's just a shell. And as they dig up the corpse and they play around with it, and they give it funny faces, and they throw it in the air, and they wave it around, you're just sort of like that. You're apathetic to it all. But if anything, it says more about them than it says about the relative or about you. And that's kind of what I felt while I was watching Captain America: A Brave New World.
All right.
Mauler.
Well, yeah, it did the whole adventure. So Cap 1 has been and always will be essentially to me like a really great foundation, sort of blueprint for how to do a hero movie. Lots of them exist, but that's just another one. I have issues with it, but nothing like too shocking, nothing that can't be ironed out in a redraft or two. It's the kind of stuff it's like, oh, if only they had said this there, or if they had done this there, we'd all be fine and dandy. It feels like such a great archetype hero film, like the fundamental values of you must fight evil for the side of good, nice and simplistic for most of it, and then just some good camaraderie and the sacrifices people make to protect the world, sort of thing. And Cap's ultimate challenge at the end of the film of would you give your life to save the world, essentially, and he said yes, and he did it, and that was very it's got some good jokes, good drama, and nice pacing, and just sets him up for a good bout in the Avengers. It's a really solid film. I'm quite fond of Captain America: The First Avenger, despite any particular issues I have with it. Winter Soldier, bit more complicated. I really like their ideas. Can't say much for the execution, other than the way that like fight scenes get filmed. I like the soundtrack. I like a lot of the different editing choices here and there, but good God, like the execution of some of that film. It's remarkable that it is considered one of the most grounded and sort of like dark and espionage-y, sort of like we're taking this seriously grounded sort of films in the MCU, when it has an evil German AI who like cackles as he explains his whole plans to the heroes and then tries to blow them up and fails. Like it's one of the most cartoon sort of like Saturday morning cartoon type like villainous moments in the whole. It comes across as so fucking bizarre, even upon rewatching that whole sequence. But there's other bits that are just like unfortunate in terms of making everybody look and seem retarded when you think about different things they could be doing or should be doing. And of course, I love the thematic value of security versus freedom, but I think to start with, hey Cap, we recently here at SHIELD created like an enormous set of helicarriers that are gonna basically be able to kill anybody who's our enemies right before they even realize they're taking action against us. It's like, what? Like that's what the fuck elevation
You're okay
of
with this, right?
It's like, and he's like, yeah, well, you know, that's what it's. We got to be careful because who knows
Remember
what we're
when
gonna be
you
fighting.
fought Hitler? Anyway,
It's
check this out.
and then, of course, oh no, the bad guys take control of it, and then their plan is to just wipe out millions of people because they're all potential people like Iron Man who will stop us from blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, there's just the more standard Phase 2 world building problems in that, where we don't see all of the heroes that should absolutely be getting involved with how insane the situation is. You know, and just different choices being made. Like they tell us for a while that the Winter Soldier is this horrifying assassin of myth that no one has ever really seen, and yet he's had great influence across all of history. And every single instance of him attacking in that movie is not one of subtlety. He's in fact, you might even say it's the opposite, where he stands in the middle of roads firing like rocket launchers, or he jumps on people's cars on the highway, and it's just like, yeah, nobody knows this fucker exists. Like, that's crazy. How could anyone have remembered? I guess he kills all witnesses. That's how he always gets away with it. But yeah, the parts I enjoy about it would be like Natasha and Steve's relationship, or the decisions Steve will make ultimately regarding Bucky. Less so the helicarriers, but Civil War makes up for that, so it's okay. In any case, I'd say that movie's ultimate challenge is now moved on from would you give your life to save the world to would you give your life to save a good person, and even when they're trying to kill you, right? That's going to be Bucky, and Steve says yes, challenged, and comes through on it again, making him very easy to get behind. And then Civil War like brings everything from Age of Ultron and Iron Man's journey and Cap's journey and everything we realize about Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. all to a big head with splitting the team in half as to exactly how they should be operating in the world, which was long overdue for the world building of the MCU. You cannot have a group of Americans running around blowing everything up at their own preference in any given country. There's a great movie called Team America that tries to address this. It was a very serious attempt, a political film. But in any case, I've not made any secret about how much I thoroughly enjoy Civil War for all kinds of reasons. But one of them at the time was that it felt like it was rebinding the MCU. It was trying to essentially say, okay, we need to calm down because it's getting a little out of control in terms of actually understanding how this world can possibly work, and that's going to have consequences if we don't reset a little bit here and have everything functioning in some way. Wouldn't want to end up with everything all over the place and every movie coming out having nothing to do with the previous one because no one can be asked to stitch these films together anymore. That would be bad. what happens. But it's fine. Civil War itself, challenging Cap the furthest across the trilogy, I would say. This time it's like, would you complete that same challenge from Winter Soldier, only this time all of the reasons to not do it, as in to not defend Bucky from the state of the world coming down on him and for everybody telling him he's doing the wrong thing, including all of the Avengers, including the world governments, when you believe you have the correct position. It's like him versus the entire world, including all the people that he cares about deeply. It's really like his ultimate test, and he comes close to dying many times in that film, but he sticks to his principles, and it's still a fascinating film to me in the sense that everybody's so sure of who was right in it, and it keeps that debate going to this day. You'll still see people arguing passionately about whose side they would have been on, which I think for a film called Civil War is... not bad at all for achieving that. And at the same time, I've always defended it as a definitive Captain America film. I know it stars basically everybody, but that was necessary in terms of world building. Again, I know it's difficult budget wise to get all of those famous actors playing all of those characters, but to have everybody say,
but when you're making $7 trillion a minute, then
you try and control it, and Iron Man was an integral part of that. To me, like watching that film, like he's absolutely antagonistic, but he needed to represent a particular side, and watching his journey.
Well, you couldn't do an Iron Man recap without Civil War.
No, that's a super important movie for Iron Man, and and we introduced Spider-Man and Black Panther, and many people consider it the best film for Black Panther and Spider-Man. Not saying that I do necessarily, but I do for Black Panther. But it treats everyone very fucking well, and it gives us probably the best villain in the MCU. And it's as simple as I don't appreciate what you fuckers do when you save the world, quote unquote. And a lot of people didn't get that because it was like, what the fuck? They can do whatever they want if they're saving the world. It's like, no, not quite. A little bit more complicated. And the film tries to offer that sort of shit while simultaneously dealing with a lot of different issues. I think it ends with like Cap moving away from the official role and instead just sticking to the absolute representation of the values and going rogue, right? He's like the Captain America of the Rogue Avengers. It's in a way the end. You don't actually like you could see that as the end of his story. You're like, he's out there forever fighting the bad guys where he finds them and choosing to use the power of the individual where they believe it is the right time and place to use it. It's like, oh, that's wonderful, and he's already proven he's very much a good man, blah, blah, blah. Then Endgame happens, and so Cap gets assassinated pretty thoroughly. To this day, it's like worth reminding everybody that that's still probably the most damage that's ever going to get done to him, is to abandon the fight for a girl. I know it's sweet in a sense and cute, and everyone thinks that Peggy is gorgeous. I understand all of those perspectives, but at the same time, the man would never have done that. He will fight until he's dead. That's Captain America. It's pretty obvious, pretty clear, but it can be distracting with everything that happens in Endgame. I wouldn't encourage that notion. And at the end of it, he says, you know what, Falcon, you're the next Captain America, which was like, what? For everybody who didn't already know, it was pretty clear with the way the films are set up that Bucky was going to be taking the mantle, if such a mantle was to exist, especially because he needs a new identity to pour the better man that he is into rather than the Winter Soldier. And Falcon already had his own identity pretty thoroughly. He's got his own tech that's very specific and his own sort of way of dealing with situations. So passing him the shield felt really fucking weird. Like, especially considering he's a flying dude, a shield is just odd to provide him, and you don't know how it's going to be incorporated. And so then we get Falcon the Winter Soldier, which is possibly the most hateful piece of shit in the MCU as a show. As was mentioned, we did not intend to cover it. We were just going to tolerate it as like a side quest and be like, yeah, it'll just be in the memory banks. But it was so fucking awful that we decided to do a full breakdown of it. It ruined Falcon and Winter Soldier. Both of them as characters were absolutely destroyed. It introduced John Walker, who is currently one of the best characters in the MCU. He might actually be the best, except maybe for Zemo.
Might be. I mean, Zemo.
Spider-Man.
Zemo kind of made it out of the show unscathed. So
unbelievable. The events of that show. the same people who ruined almost everything managed to make Zemo not cringe and to create Walker, obviously accidentally making him more compelling than they wanted. They were hoping we wouldn't like him, or we would understand he's like the anti-Captain America.
Played evil music to be
Yes,
like,
lots of
"Look,
evil
you
music.
meant to hate him."
The point with Walker, of course, is like he does not embody the important aspects that are needed to be Captain America, while Falcon does, which is insane and nonsense, considering the two biggest moments that I always remember to do with the shield between both of them. For Walker, it is to throw the shield away in order to save people's lives and to even take hits from terrorists instead of letting go of that truck, like, until he gets pulled off by them. It's one of the most, like, oh, you fucking assholes, taking him away from, like, saving all of these people. And then meanwhile, Falcon, someone might pick the fact that he ends up grabbing that truck before it crashes, even though Walker was the one that gave him the time and ability to do that. And Falcon had all the tech in the world inexplicably to be able to pull these sorts of things off. He doesn't have to sacrifice anything, is my point. The part that I always remember about Falcon is when he broke Walker's arm and stole the shield off him. In a non-combatant situation, the guy was grieving his dead friend who literally 5 minutes ago got killed, and he decided to do that. It's the kind of thing that just ruins the character, but gives us some other ones as almost consolation prizes. In any case, we then come to this film. And with all of that history...
Weird. You didn't mention the part that kind of always stuck with me, which is the terrorist sympathizer part that is always...
We will be here all day if I list every single problem I have with Falcon.
I suppose
Believe me,
that's true.
There are so many moments in... like I said, there's a lot of hate in the MCU in terms of like hating itself, but that one, it just takes the cake. Rewatching it, I was almost like surprised by how much I had happily forgotten. It's a fucking... You know what? We did 11 hours of coverage of it. Go check it out if you want to see what we thought, because we were not happy about that fucking show. In any case, I feel like, because we're going to be talking about it today, I can sort of end around there. But with all of that as the foundation, to say like, we're going to get Falcon's movie where he's got the shield and he's going to fight a Hulk, it's like, what the fuck is happening? What are we doing? What is going on anymore? And it's just like, they don't know. We don't know. And yet here we are. So I'm quite fond of Captain America's trilogy. It's the best one in the MCU, I would argue. And it's he with Iron Man are the core of the character journeys, like at their best in the MCU. But slowly, there's just been all this erosion, damage, and destruction. And I'd say this movie sort of tries to solidify that it doesn't want Steve as part of Captain America, but it's not going to succeed.
Just
sorry.
Just very quickly on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Is it worth mentioning, just because it's going to be omitted, where that leaves off in terms of what the stakes for that part of the MCU are? Because like obviously you have the ongoing fight all the way through over like the spread of super soldier serum and the terrorist groups which want to return to a during the blip state of affairs where everyone gets to live wherever they want. There's no borders or anything like that. And so from what I remember anyway, the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the government will be reintroducing national borders and people will be moved back to, wherever it was that they are supposed to be or were before the blip happened. That's where that leaves off. And obviously there's the injunction for the senators to do better. So we have to, I guess, assume that they did do better, because that's not going to come up ever during this movie. This movie will draw on other things entirely.
That'll be part of the world-building preamble, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. Since all three of you essentially touched on a variety of different things that I think are worthwhile in terms of recapping the story of Captain America in the MCU, I will try and keep it brief. I would say that there is a task that is that sort of no. No.
I got excited. Carry on.
When making a Captain America story, there is a task that essentially is imposed upon the director, the writers, the storytellers as a whole, and the actor, in this case Chris Evans, which is to show the viewer why Captain America is a leader and what kind of leader he is, and what kind of leader he needs to become to address whatever situation he should find himself in. We all treat it essentially as just, Captain America's the leader of the Avengers. He is the leader. That's not something that you just arrive at by default. there are a variety of other heroes that existed in the MCU before the Avengers. Not a whole lot, but a few. All of whom were, mavericks in their own way, making important decisions, deciding what their values are, and fighting for them. So why is it that Captain America emerges as the leader of the Avengers? Well, it's essentially what the entire trilogy and every instance that he appears in any of the films, in his films and in the Avengers films, are trying to demonstrate. Captain America, the first Avenger, demonstrates who Steve is at his core, and what that allows him to become. With the help of the super soldier serum, rising to the role of Captain America, bravely going out, fighting for his friends, fighting to make the world a better place. Being brought into the Avengers, where the world is more complicated, and there are a variety of other powerful people who he doesn't necessarily agree with in terms of their methodology, particularly Tony, who he butts heads with very directly, doesn't believe that he's the kind of person who would make the sacrifice play, which of course he gets proven wrong on. But nevertheless, Cap still emerges as the leader of that team. He is the man that they all rely on and trust to make the right decisions, to not just because of his experience, not just the fact that he has a lot of experience and maybe not more experience than Thor since he's pretty old, but certainly like more experience in dealing with these sorts of situations than Tony. So
like the moral
but it's
grounding in a way.
Yeah, so it's not specifically because he can make the best tactical decisions, even though there's an assumption that he can. It's that he's reliable. The people he demonstrates himself to be a principled person, the kind that people would want to follow, the kind of person who they would want to be taking charge and taking the lead. And he just very clearly demonstrates himself to be the leader of the Avengers. Now, of course, in Winter Soldier and Civil War, the nature of what kind of person he needs to be starts to get challenged because he's in a new environment, an unfamiliar environment. The lines are blurrier, and he is essentially confronted with the problem of what does it mean to be Captain America now compared to before he went in the ice. Where that leads is not necessarily. It's kind of interesting to think about that the fallout of Civil War is that the Avengers lost in Infinity War. He made his choice to stand by his friend, to defy the Accords, based on his principles that over the course of all of the prior films had led him from being the kind of person who would take orders to the kind of person who would defy the orders if he felt that they were wrong, and to fight for what he believes is right. And the fallout of that is that the Avengers lose. And then, unfortunately, Endgame does a very terrible job of allowing them to win, and then he quits and decides to retire, even though, as Mola had mentioned previously, Captain America is the kind of person who would fight until he died. Basically, he would never stop. Especially given that there's no reason to believe that Thanos would be the last threat that they would face. Indeed, in the years since then, there have been many major threats that the Avengers have faced that it might have been worthwhile if he was there. But if you memory hole that, what you have there is a very compelling character. A character who consistently demonstrates why he is the principled leader that everybody likes and that everybody finds aspirational, both in that universe and in our own world. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier happened and demonstrated that if we are going to treat Captain America as a mantle, John Walker deserves to be Captain America. He
100%.
forgoes the shield to save lives. I mean, if there feels like the clearest example of it, he abandons the symbol of being Captain America to do what Captain America would do, and receives nothing for it. What he receives for it is, oh, you're an anti-hero. That's what you are.
You're in the Thunderbolts now. Have fun.
Anti-hero. I suppose the main takeaway though from all of that would be that aside from the sense that you essentially do need to justify why Sam is going to be Captain America, the purpose and role of a Captain America film is to explain and justify why this guy, whoever that may be, throughout the entire run it was Steve, but now it is going to be Sam Wilson, is what makes him the principled leader that people would want to follow. And I would say that this film, on that point and on a variety of points, basically goes like it shrugs because it doesn't know what it wants to say. Because Captain America: Brave New World is not exactly a brave movie.
No.
It's not the worst movie, I guess.
Well, yeah. So that maybe
No.
that can be a direction to take it in. I found it a little bit fascinating that this movie is essentially being ganged up on by everybody when like it is very much middle of the road by Phase 4 and 5 standards, which means it's like a 2 out of 10. It's terrible, but like
Yeah,
it
this is
can't even
awful.
come close to other films that have come out over the last, Phase 4 and 5, and TV shows as well. Like WandaVision has to be worse than this, I would say, because of the damage that it deals to Wanda. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I definitely hate more than this. That show makes me really angry in a way that this doesn't. Loki is obviously dramatically worse. Multiverse of Madness is worse. Quantum Mania is worse. The Marvels is probably worse than this. And there's one other, and She-Hulk is worse than this too. And Secret Invasion. And then there's one other film that I think is probably worse than this.
But it's saved by being so massively inconsequential. Like, does it, besides character assassination of someone who may or may not belong in the role of Captain America anyway, it doesn't really destroy too much about the wider universe, I don't think. I mean, it does its fair share of
By Phase
damage.
4
But
and 5 standards, no.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. For as crazy as the mind control shit is, it ain't as bad as Incursions. It's not as bad as that thing in Thor: Love and Thunder, the Infinity whatever like thing that could give you like whatever you wanted. It was just like the ultimate power in the universe. Secret Invasion is more consequential in terms of the effects that it has on Earth than what happens in this film. Loki is more consequential because of all the time travel stuff. Like, it's kind of awkward. For as crazy as all this shit is, it kind of can't reach the lows that a lot of other Phase 4 and 5 projects get to because it's not time and space breaking.
Yeah, to be clear of what I think Fringy's getting at, an example of it would be High Top put out a tweet saying like this is one of the soulless, artistically, retarded, sort of disgusting examples of just how much the MCU has fallen. It's like, how could they do this? It's a film that's torn to shreds. There's nothing left of what the vision of the person who made this is. Blah 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 blah. And you read it and you're like, where have you been, man? Like, what is going on?
Where have you been? It's been this way for the last 4 years. Like, oh, Captain America: Brave New World is soulless. It doesn't have anything to say, and it's stupid. They all are.
Yeah.
This isn't a standout film. This is exactly what I think all of us were expecting it would be. So it's really
Pretty
weird that
much,
it's being singled out as like it's the same as when Quantumania got singled out. It's like it is now. To be fair, Quantumania is worse than this. Like, it is one of the worst ones. But it's just funny. It's like, what are we doing? Why are we pretending that they aren't all terrible except for No Way Home, which itself is a flawed film anyway? They all suck. And by Phase 4 and 5 standards, this one might not even just be middle of the road. It might end up just being like in the upper tier of the Phase 4 and 5
Technically,
film.
yeah. The ceiling
when I
is
think about
so
all the
low, or the
projects,
floor.
Because, like I said, if I run through my head, it's like WandaVision, I don't know, man. Like, that finale was awful. Falcon and Winter Soldier is definitely worse than this. Loki's worse than this. Black Widow is probably comparable to this in terms of its badness. Shang-Chi is probably better. Eternals is probably as bad, maybe a little bit worse because it's got the celestial shit. We didn't watch Hawkeye, but Hawkeye is probably better than this, but I was not impressed by that first episode. Moon Knight is better than this, but not very. And then what Multiverse of Madness is definitely worse than this. Thor: Love and Thunder is definitely worse than this. Miss Marvel's better than this. Wakanda Forever, is it better than this or is it the same as this?
I think similar.
I think it's similar-ish. I'm trying to think about, because at this point we have to get into like the scales and the world building implications, which I think are worse in Wakanda Forever because of all the Atlantis stuff. And
Is it bad
things.
a lot of the ones you've been mentioning, I'm sort of refreshing myself, but man, Wakanda Forever, we did a full breakdown. I don't think I remember anything that happened in that film.
Anything about it, yeah.
That's a rough one, man.
I often forget that it exists, which Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it probably is comparable. And then it's like, okay, so what's next? Quantumania, that's worse. Guardians 3.
Oh man, I'm trying to remember what our
Um,
final verdict on that was.
I think Rocket
Didn't we like?
saved it. I
Yeah,
think.
the rocket.
Yeah,
the
it's
rocket
good.
parts would
I mean,
elevate it
Rocket-
above this. Yeah.
Rocket saved it and saved it from I'd say it's above this. Secret Invasion is definitely worse than this.
Yes.
Yeah, Secret of it.
Absolutely
Yeah, that
is
was a
worse than
catastrophe.
this. And the Marvels is worse than this too, I think.
It is almost like the worst possible rule to have, but it's the rule they do operate by, which is that the more consequential you try to make your thing, the worse it becomes. And the less consequential you try to
Typically.
make it, the better it ends up being. Or at least, well, the less consequential by definition it ends up being. Because most of the
I
ones that
think
we've
so.
listed as being definitively worse than this have either had something to say which is really bad, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or have tried to really push the world in a brand new direction and failed at that massively, or have done something else, like been more innovative, been a bit more, I almost want to say daring, and then just failed and fallen flat on their faces. Whereas this is just like, this is what they consider to be the safest of safe bets. Don't do anything. The end credit scene is just a guy saying, hey, there will be a new movie at some point.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no new universe shattering implications there. So it just doesn't do damage because it doesn't try to do anything.
Which is a little ironic for a film called A Brave New World.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's really quite cowardly.
I think we're nearly done with the list because I was thinking in my head, it's like, so Echo I can't remember anything about Echo. Is it better or worse?
Echo
than
was relatively really small
Uh,
stakes, and it was mostly
yeah.
just stupid stuff.
It gets very
It
silly at
introduced
the
another
end,
magic
but-
system,
At the
but
end,
it
yeah.
only affects a
Yeah.
couple people.
Damn. Yeah, it might end up being better than this.
Might. I still
Okay,
hate what they did
narrowly.
with Kingpin.
Narrowly.
and that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
might
think it's
become relevant
painful.
again soon in the next few months, even.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Deadpool and Wolverine.
Nah.
Mm.
Terrible.
And that one's catastrophically bad. So yeah, one of the worst.
Cast it into
Uh-oh.
the fire.
And then next up is Agatha, which I would say is worse than this too.
Yeah.
Made me
What about Mr.
angrier, that's
Shark?
for sure.
Mr. Shark
Oh, yeah,
is
that was
trying
pre-
his
yeah,
hardest to
does
save that
elevate it
show.
above?
He tried.
Ooh,
Um,
Mr. Shark hiding in the rafters.
and
man.
She-Hulk. Wait, I forgot about that. She-Hulk is worse than this.
That's easy.
Oh yeah,
Breaks
She-Hulk
the
is-
fourth
oh, yeah,
wall.
oh,
Yes.
yeah.
So, do you see the awkward problem when you actually really think about it? This ends up being, if not in the middle, but in the upper tier of Phase 4 and 5 MCU projects.
Which is
For
no
as terrible
compliment
as
at
it
all.
is, bear in mind, we will repeat it again. This film is awful,
Sucks.
but like Phase 4 and 5 are a uniquely bad stretch of films and television shows in the history of. Oh, and I mentioned Eternals, right? Yeah. Yeah, we did. The point still stands. This this is middling at worst by MCU Phase 4 and 5 standards. Yet it's being singled out as one of the worst ones. It's just funny. Where was everybody for all the other ones?
Yeah, it really is wild
be
to
fair-
think this might be one of the better ones because the bar is so low for this phase. I have to call 811 if I want to find it.
High Top did say that Deadpool and Wolverine was pretty soulless. So,
Dang, yeah, that's true. So he gets points for that.
He gets a W for that. A lot of people
Well, if you
were fooled
remember,
by that movie.
he got a half a
surprisingly
W
big
because
W.
his video was
The video was
retarded,
pretty
but
bad.
broadly, like he had like the right direction. He was going places. He's a strange man.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't covered him
So
since the
better is a
anniversary,
very
right?
relative term here. Better is always a relative term, but here it's an extremely relative term.
It's very relative because again, you know, it really is fascinating to think that the MCU went from being on top of the world. Not only did it make a lot of money, but like a lot of people defended it as being worthwhile because for a time it was, and that even extended to films that were pretty terrible. But now it's at a point where it's just like, yeah, this is what happens when you release like 15 projects in a row that are bad. This is the consequence, is that everything starts to fail. Nothing can escape. And everybody's kind of rooting for it to fail, which is a sort of fascinating phenomenon, I suppose.
I can't remember. Did I have a brain fart, or did you mention Thor: Love and Thunder in the?
Yeah, you did.
I might
Is
have
it better?
forgotten.
No, you
Okay.
mentioned
It's,
it.
it's definitely worse.
Yeah, clearly.
It's definitely
I
Thor:
was
Love and Thunder
curious.
was
I just
foul.
came- It was foul.
Yeah.
It was a stinky boy.
But when you've got 4 or 5 projects that are actually 1 out of 10, then it starts to which.
Which is that's an accomplishment in and of its own. What an achievement to make that many terrible movies.
You would accidentally make a good one.
Yeah, like,
Just
oh, we fucked up
accidentally.
when we made a character that. Well, I guess that is the only way they've made characters we like is they fucked up their intentions. What, like John Walker? That was not what they intended.
No. Another comparison I think to be made as well, I was thinking about it with the hospital scene, was when Tony has to deal with Rhodey getting shot out of the sky, and then like deal for a moment, or at least selection time, that he's very likely dead, and then like that stops him from being able to stop Steve and Bucky, and you got the weight of that is the compromise slash consequence of the entire thing, right? And he has to watch him struggle to walk, and know that like all of this is almost destroyed his friend's ability, which gets ruined the more you go on. You wouldn't know he had that, and he was a fucking Skrull. We're ignoring this for a second, okay? Like but then you compare with Sam, and he's like, oh my goodness, Joaquin has been shot down. I'm going after him. And then they're just like, you can't. He's like, okay. And then later on says, yeah, you fucked up. Yep. You know what I mean? Like comparing, it's like you stole that, and then you did nothing with it within your own thing. At least Civil War's, like, a lot of people's criticisms of it, like, the Accords really didn't go anywhere, and Tony and Steve, they got back together real easy, and, Rhodey's crippling, like,
Civil War's
results got undone. Yeah, and the Avengers did get back together. It's like, Civil War didn't do any of those things. Why is it getting blamed for this?
It isn't fair, damn it.
And then Brave New World, like, all of its copycat shit is just all really stale and hollow versions of all the payoffs in other films. It is remarkable how much this one is a desperate attempt to like cobble together the things they know people like, quote unquote. They're like, you like this, right? And this, but it's done by someone who doesn't know how to do it. And all for what? Falcon. You will call him Captain America. It's like, maybe, you know what? I don't think I will.
Yeah, I actually don't have to. I don't have to, and you can't make me.
And I don't know how long the MCU is going to call him Captain America, to be honest with you. I don't think it's going to last, because this is not going to work.
No, I don't know what the future is going to hold, but it seems unlikely.
What's the plan?
That whatever direction this film was supposed to lead it in, especially with the response it's receiving and the likely underperformance at the box office, that's it. That's the movie. Captain America.
What do you think?
Brave New World.
I don't think we really talked about the title. Like A Brave New World in the movie is supposed to represent a world with adamantium.
Yeah,
I guess
that's what it.
Well,
no, that's like explicit. I think that's
what they say in the movie. But obviously, it's going to mean a little more than that broadly, like thematically. Obviously, it's also like this is our Captain America now. It's another element of the Brave New World, which is just kind of like, okay. Man.
It should be, we haven't even really entered the Brave New World. We've been told the Brave New World is coming because of adamantium. And then we've sort of treaded a lot of water in order to end the film in roughly the position we began it with.
Yep.
But if the treaty was signed, and the treaty is about the fair and equitable distribution of said adamantium, does that mean we pick up in future MCU movies and everyone has adamantium? Is that going to...
Another excuse for them to have crazy weapons whenever they want to pop up.
I think it's going to be lamer than that. I think we're not going to hear about it until they do their X-Men movie. And then maybe in terms of like they're introducing a new Wolverine, then it will come up again.
And he won't have his adamantium, and then some guy called Stryker will grab him and will be like, oh my god,
Yeah.
But you can't introduce it as this is the discovery of the millennium. It will change everything. It's applicable everywhere, and then just not use it. They have to use it somewhere.
They won't.
They're already so far ahead of it anyway. All the magical shit they have as a team. And we're going through the multiverse again in the next two Avengers films.
Oh, no.
Exactly. So they don't have time.
Whoever the Avengers are.
Whoever they end up being, exactly.
That was going to be my next question, which is how, if at all, does this movie lead into whatever the fuck that story is going to be? Because at least with the older Captain America films, you can sort of say, well, values and certain arguments about values carry through into Avengers films. They dictate actions. They dictate who's on what side and where they are and when they are and what their attitude toward each other is. How does this movie in any way set us up for anything?
Well, the film does begin with them getting a new president, and it basically ends with them getting a new president too. We just don't know who it is.
And they mentioned how the Avengers haven't been formed yet, and the film ends without answering that.
Yeah.
Yep. And no one has more vibranium than they started with, or adamantium than they started with.
No. So nothing actually changed.
I mean, I saw it described positively.
This can only help the score. Yeah, like this can only help the state of the MCU.
Well, so I saw it described positively by someone who enjoyed the film. That it's like a good episode of Falcon the Winter Soldier, but extended. It was like, what?
No,
there's like 17 things. Yeah.
Code.
Ooh, yeah.
That's it.
What about wraps it
It'd
up?
be kind of It'd be interesting too if, because adamantium is this special magic space metal, or not technically space metal, I guess, but it's this new magic metal. And the whole premise was that maybe in an effort, it's got to be special in order to refine. Not everyone can do it. So the political situation revolving around, well, we don't want to have like the U.S. and other countries like that have exclusive access to it, but only they have the technology and the capability to actually do anything with it. How does the U.S. and the UN and all that divvy up how it can be sent and spent, and do the countries who actually have the ability to refine it, do they get a special say? And how do terrorists and whatnot try and make their way into destabilizing that process so they can get their hands on it? There's groundwork for a story here that could be interesting, that would play really well into the espionage angle that, at least in the past, Captain America has tried to go for. The idea of doing a bunch of weird Hulk stuff and mind control things, again, is kind of doubly bizarre when you consider the opportunity cost of what kinds of stories they could have told with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
Pretty, yeah, pretty good. 7 out of 10.
And was mentioned, I didn't find that it was particularly far away from what I was expecting. It wasn't a huge shock, this film. It was like, well, what would have shocked me, I think, is more of like meta cringe and lots of like lines that are just aggressively hateful towards Steve, which I think were all stripped out for the most part during those reshoots. Because this film is a relic of an older time that they clearly tried to alter the closer it got to release. They'll be curious to track Marvel, because we have it on good authority from different folks in our sphere that Marvel, behind the scenes, are interested in trying to get back on the horse, so to speak, and make money again.
I bet they are.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is,
you really
Star
notice
Wars,
how much money you had when you don't have it anymore.
Comparatively, Star Wars are not. They're more than happy to continue making shit like The Acolyte, apparently. But
I guess
Marvel want to find a way back, which Russo's
well, at least
and
they
Robert
learned
Downey
their lesson
makes sense.
canceling it.
Well, the problem is that the biggest success they've had in recent times is Deadpool Wolverine. So if that's what their idea of getting back on the horse is, I would kind of rather they stayed off it. Just die with your horse.
One of the issues is that, kind of unfortunately, there is an element of it being a bottom-up problem as well. People really, really like Deadpool vs. Wolverine. So unfortunately, that might be the direction that they're taking, because people really liked it, despite its quality and what it said.
Jackman shall return. So will Tobey Maguire. So will fucking everyone you've ever loved, probably. Probably even Wesley Snipes' Blade now, because they can't make anything else work. Who knows? But,
Who does?
anything closing on Falcon the Winter Soldier? The movie? Not really mess.
No, it's just bad. It's
bad.
And you all know it was going to be bad. Don't watch it.
Bad.
Can't wait for Thunderbolts.